out for everybody how today is going to go. I'm going to introduce some amazing people, which we all probably heard their names in the community. And when I call your name, kind of like a roll call, just wave your hands, blow some kisses, throw some blessings, whatever it is that you want to do to let us know you're here. So, starting with our 3PGC board members who are on the call, Mr. Dickin Bettinger. Hey, Dickin, how you doing? Miss Chris Heath, George and Linda Pransky, Aaron Turner, if you wave at those. Also here from Sid's family, which we're so amazed to have here, Miss Judy Banks and Mr. David Banks. And from the originals, we have Judy Segman, Mark Howard, Kathy Casey, Rita Shepard, Bill Pettig, Sandy Crott, Keith Blevins, Carrie Miller Williams, Darlene Needleman, Krista and Bob Capsule and Harry Dobrinsky. And we also have Richard Myers. Were there any originals I missed who are still on there? Please unmute and shout your name out.
Phil Kromka.
Hey, Phil, how you doing? Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Marika's going to join in when she can. She's at work right now.
Got it.
So, hi, everybody.
How you doing, sir?
Good.
Thank you for being here today. So how we today is going to go really is in a second, I want to bring somebody on and I'm going to cue her up. Now, if you can get ready. There was a song that she wrote that was inspired by seeing Sid speak in Hawaii, and it's called Heaven. And we're going to share with that, and then I'm going to toss it over to Dickin to get us started. And we're just going to have a good time in sharing some fun-filled stories, because what we're looking for in this particular call is to bring everybody together and take a lighthearted approach to how we want to continue this work in the field. It's much more now needed than it's ever been with what we seem to be facing abroad. And we had a great idea to bring all of these amazing voices together, let them all be heard, and have some fun so that when you go out and do the amazing things that you do, the evidence of impact continues to grow. And so that's really it today. So if you smile, if you laugh, if you cry, we check. We fill the box on what it was to do here today. So now if you're ready, I can't see you because of all the people. You start singing and we will catch you on the screen. And then after that, the next voice you'll hear be Dickin Bettinger, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Rob.
How you doing?
Nice to see everyone on my screen. There's 6 more, so hello to everyone out there. As Rob said, this song came through me after hearing Sid speak in Hawaii. And I actually did my best to send it to him right before he died on an archaic cassette tape. I'm not sure if he ever got it, but just share this with you here. It's called Heaven. Can everyone hear that, the guitar? Great, okay, wonderful. I want to tell you so true about a feeling.
You need something?
Inside of you. It is warm, it is loving and kind. It is all you are looking.
You muted by mistake. Unmute yourself now.
Geez, sorry about that.
There you go.
Okay, silence. That's what matters, right? No thought, no concept, right?
I love it. I
okay,
love
here
it.
we go again. Okay. I want to tell you so true about a feeling inside of you. It is warm. warm, it is loving and kind. It is all you are looking to find. Stop searching so hard. Stop looking outside of your yard. There's heaven within, just waiting for you to dive in. The past, it is dead, this is true. And the future exists not for you. But this moment within, it is living and holy, my friend. So begin, dive in, begin, dive in, begin, dive in, begin. Stop dreaming, my friends, of the day when your life will begin. Close your eyes to the world you will see. Living spirit, we were born to be free. Lie, 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 lie. This feeling was meant to be shared. It is dancing and breathing our air. Please don't hoard it or hide it away. Give it freely to all who you meet in your day. Stop searching so hard. Stop looking outside of your yard. There's heaven within, just waiting for you to dive in. So I want to tell you so true about a feeling inside of you. It is warm, it is loving and kind. It is all you are looking to find, to find, to find, to find, to find.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Dickon Bettinger. Hey, Dickens.
Hey, Rob. Yeah, that was absolutely perfect way to start this gathering. Thank you. Oh my gosh. On behalf of everyone at Three Principles Global Community, I just wanted to heartfelt welcome to everybody. It's been quite a year, hasn't it? And given what we know, it's become a year not just of challenges, but of endless opportunities. And so we've been even more committed than ever to help spread Sid's message through the world, bring it to our practitioners. And now we're finding new ways to think about helping it continue to expand globally. You know, I don't know about you, but every day, different things Sid said come to mind. And this morning, I heard him saying, don't ever try to go higher. Just be grateful for what you have. Well, I know everybody here is enormously grateful for Sid's message, and we're enormously grateful for having each and every one of you in our lives. I'm going to tell a quick little story. I'm sitting in my office in Vermont and the phone rings and it's Sid. And we chat about the weather for a minute, and then in typical Sid fashion, he brings to me something I needed to hear more than I realized. He says, Dickon, you have to take people beyond the psychological to the spiritual. And I go, oh, I know, Sid, that's so important. And he goes, no, you have to take people beyond the psychological to the spiritual. And I said, yeah. No, you have to take people beyond the, I bet he said it 10 times. And after about the 5th time, I shut up and said, oh man, I gotta listen. And then I gotta listen deeper. I gotta listen deeper. And then it really started to hit that intellectually I didn't have a clue, but that there was something there in that deep space within, in that feeling, that speaks volumes. I'd like to open this up now and invite any of you either to tell a fond story that you have of your time with Sid, or perhaps a humorous story about what it was like when you were first trying to understand what Sid was talking about and what that was like. So we'll just welcome everybody, and we're just going to open it up and let people, we'll just have plenty of time for sharing.
We know, I'd like to acknowledge John Enright because he's the one that started the whole thing. In other words, John Enright was the first, who was George's partner, was the first man, the first person to introduce Sid to us. And then we introduced Sid to Roger Mills. And it was through Roger Mills that we got interested because Sid had such an effect on Roger. And I'd never seen anyone change so much. And I was completely intrigued by the change in Roger Mills. And so we went back up to listen to Sid to see if we could get the same kind of change for ourselves. And it was quite an experience because Roger would say, well, just listen and you'll get affected and you'll get the kind of changes that you're looking for, the kind of help you're looking for. And so we go and listen and nothing would happen. So we'd call Roger and complain, nothing's happening. How come you changed, you got affected and we didn't? And he kept talking about listening. And after a really long time of sitting in front of Sid in the front row of his lectures, I finally got hit. I finally realized what was going on. And I realized 2 things. One is I realized what a quiet mind was. It was the first time I could remember having the experience of a quiet mind. And then the second thing I realized is that how learning happened, how true learning happened. It wasn't through the intellect. the kind of learning you wanted, the kind of change, the kind of help. It just didn't happen in the intellect. And what I'd learned in school and what I'd learned from my colleagues so far is that if you wanted to, if you wanted to change, if you wanted to make a difference, you would just try to think your way into that change through the intellect. And I realized that that was impossible. It was totally not the way to get to have change happen or get help. And that was extremely powerful to realize those two things: a quiet mind, the experience of that, and also to realize how true change happened. And looking back, it's so, I don't know, funny to me. It was so perplexing and so fascinating to sit there and listen to Sid and see everyone around me just delighted with what they were hearing, and then not hear anything myself until I did. It was a fascinating experience being around at that time, being around an enlightened man. It was just such a gift. I mean, it was such serendipity. I wasn't looking for Sid, and I found him, through John Enright. I just really want to acknowledge him. Do you have anything that you want to add?
Well, I particularly wanted to reach out to the people who were on Salt Spring, who put a lot of energy to helping us to, meet Sid and get this all going. And I know one story that I was really interesting to me was let me see how to say this. Sid had never met anybody who was as anxious as I was. So I met him early on, and he was intrigued by how anxious I was. And when I noticed that he was interested in the fact that I was so anxious, and he asked me about it. Well, I didn't think it was anything, because I was comparing myself with everybody else, and I just didn't. He said, "Well, George, I'm just intrigued." This was after I knew him for a while, but he said, I was intrigued by how nervous you were, George. And I said, well, I didn't think I was that nervous. He says, well, Barb and I, we realized that when you sat down, you would get up 5 or 6 times for a few seconds each time. And I didn't realize that was true. I was very nervous, and it took me a little time to quiet down as a human being. So that's what I wanted to share about how how different it was for me.
Thank you, George. Thank you so much. Linda, are you still there?
I am.
The first time, that story you just told, the first time I ever saw you coach, that was what you got the young lady to see how busy her mind was. And I remember calling Michael. I was like, Michael, it was like Linda was 4 steps in front. Like, how did she do that? I remember saying it, but that story makes perfect sense now because that was your insight. It was you were just talking to this young lady and just saying, baby, you see how busy you are? And it was it was just so
Yeah.
funny how you were just there with her. But that story makes perfect sense. That story makes perfect sense to me.
You know, Sid was just there with us in a quiet mind, and he would be in that quiet mind, and we would see it over and over again, and then he would prompt us. Sometimes he would say, you know, you need to calm down, you need to slow down, you get, you know, you know, life is busy because your mind is busy.
Mm-hmm.
So he was just such an amazing teacher of pointing things out in a very, most of the time, in a very gentle way, and in a very obvious way, like he did with George. When he had this ability to say things in a way that you could hear.
You could hear him. Yeah.
You could hear him, and where other people would say things and you get defensive or you'd feel criticized, he would say things in such a way that would wake you up.
Yeah.
And it would wake you up to something that was invisible to you, and then it would become visible, like George's anxiety was invisible to him.
Yeah.
And then it became visible. And once it becomes visible, then you could you can think about it in a way that's productive. But it was amazing being around Sid and having him be who he was, and in the way he was, and also the way he was as a teacher.
I absolutely love that. Thank you for sharing it. Anybody else? Any of the originals with some amazing stories for us to gain something from or to hear, just to experience?
Hi.
Yes, oh,
Oh,
sorry. Go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Kristen.
I have you. Is that Krissa?
Yeah, shall I
Hi.
go ahead?
Absolutely. Go right ahead, ma'am. How you doing?
Hey, good. Thanks, Rob. Thank you for hosting. Um, like Linda, I didn't know I was searching for anything, but looking back, I really was, as a young woman, searching for happiness, and I liked being happy. And then when Bob Campsell came to visit me in the city when I was a student there in Vancouver, and said he'd been to hear Sid, and what he learned was the secret to life. And two things I remember. One is happiness is within, and I'm like, yeah, wow, I love the sound of that. And then the second thing Bob told me was about thought creates reality. And that part I intellectually argued with for a few days, but there's no denying, like George and Linda are saying, there's no denying the feeling that comes with that. And just kind of experimenting in, inside between your ears and realizing, yeah, what I'm thinking is affecting that. What I'm seeing in my world, and that ability to connect the dots, and then all this kind of extraneous unnecessary thought falls away, and then we have a quieter mind, which is incredible. But the little story I want to say is about, well, we have a few we've been thinking of, but Sid was an amazing joke teller. And there's some awesome jokes on some of the recordings, the one about the genie who decides that, well, the genie would rather build a bridge from Hawaii to the UK rather than explain how women think, which is an amazing joke. and on one of the other recordings about how Sherlock asks Watson, what, they're out camping, Watson, what do you see? And Watson goes on for 20 minutes about the wonders of the universe, and Sherlock, what do you see? Well, someone has stolen our tent. Again, pointing to the mystery and the simplicity. And my little story is Bob and I met Sid and his dog, beloved dog Fergus, and we went for one of the forest walks here locally on Salt Spring. And I was 45 years old, and I had this special announcement that our son was getting engaged to be married, which, you know, I'm still very young, and our son was getting married, and I felt kind of, I guess, special. Well, the whole walk, I couldn't believe how many mother-in-law jokes Sid pulled out of his memory bank, so that by the end of the walk, I felt quite ordinary again. So the point being, time and again, he would, if you felt special in any way, he really brought you back down to earth to feeling ordinary, which is where, of course, the love and the happiness is. So thank you, Rob.
Bob, anything?
Bob?
Well, there's quite a few stories, actually. Just, he had this knack of seeing the funny in everything. And he loved to tease people. And he would say things like, watch this, watch this. He'd give me a little elbow. And he would say something to, say, Pam Beck. And he would nail her every time, and she would get all flustered and everything. Then we'd just start howling. And so many times, like, he would be over visiting us and, you know, have for like a dinner. And we would end up like almost rolling on the floor. Our stomachs were hurting, there were tears running down our eyes, and we couldn't stop because all you had to do was look at each other, and it was like just burst out again. And I remember when we had a guest, a young man, was about 17 years old. And we started this, and this just started to happen. And finally, after about 15 minutes, he gets up and he gets his coat on. And we said, where are you going? And he says, I'm going to see if I can find some mature people.
But I know he would say about teasing people, he'd say, well, if we stopped teasing her, she'd think we stopped loving her. So it was like loads of fun, loads of lightheartedness and fun. Absolutely.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Any more fun stories, the ones that make us giggle? Go ahead, Richard. I see your hand.
I was just reflecting when George and Linda were contributing, because I recall the first time that the very first psychologist showed up to check out Sid on the basis of John Enright. And thanks for that, Linda, because it was really the curiosity in John Enright's mind that sent his guys on a mission to check this guy out on the island, and the people that were there that were experiencing transformations that there was no explanation, given that psychology wasn't producing those results. And the curiosity is that all of us were really intrigued and really interested in these psychologists and the team that they brought with them, because Alan Flood was one of the researchers that came with them, and I've been reconnecting with Alan, and again, Alan, George, Roger, they were so curious about all the people that were there. But we were as curious, or perhaps even more curious, about these psychologists that were coming to check it out. And I didn't notice your nervousness, George, but I mean, it was so cool. This was at, I don't know if you recall, Shawnigan Lake Country Club. We had this
that's right.
beautiful gathering, meeting of the minds, really, and hearts, because it was just uplifting to just watch what unfolded. And we all know what curiosity did to the cat. And I mean, like, totally grateful that I woke up. I didn't even know I was searching. And then blink, oh, I'm searching. So I stopped. Anyways, that's my story. There's a whole lot more to it. I mean, storytelling really is a way to simply share who we are, what we know. I love two words, sympathetic harmonics, and we vibrate And souls that resonate at the same frequency will vibrate if we just vibrate. That's it. That's simple.
I absolutely love that, Richard. And I just came up with something because I'm tired of hearing myself. So after you speak, you have to toss it to somebody, Richard. So one of your friends, somebody that was there, and you toss it to them, and then they start. That way, I could kind of just listen, Richard. Sorry, but go ahead. You toss it to somebody, Richard. Rita is ready. Give it to Rita. Give it to Rita, Richard.
Aloha. Wow. Hi, Krista. All these beautiful faces, Karen. I feel more like I just want to say hi to everybody. This week has been a week when I've just felt the love of so many of us all together. It's just been profound in many ways. And to have met Sid, what an incredible good fortune, right? And, I was a searcher. I never thought of myself as a searcher, but I was always looking to find the meaning of life, right? And I always saw the potential in people, the good in people, for whatever the reason. And I never really understood why we couldn't just bring it out somehow, make it happen. Because it was so obvious to me when I would meet people, that everybody had this beauty in them. I would feel it, I'd see it, try to connect with it, right? And so I came to a conclusion at one point, finally at some point, that there was a missing link in all of the theories and things that I had read about, tried out, always on myself first. And they became a lot of words instead of something with that really stayed with me and with my clients and made a difference. And so my search ultimately came to this very simple thing of there's a missing link. And intuitively, I knew there was, but I had no idea what it was or where I would find it. And again, my good fortune was working with Roger Mills. He was one of my friends and colleagues. And Roger had met Sid. And as he was leaving, we were in Eugene, Oregon at the time. He told me about Sid. And it was really through him that I eventually got a tape that he had left for classes at the University of Oregon called The Missing Link. And really, as many of you know, it's like, okay, I had no idea who this person was. I think I may have started to hear his name in the community at that point, but I had no idea. And so 9 months after Roger left Eugene to go up to Salt Spring, I went to the university bookstore. It came to my mind right after I got accepted into the doctoral program, which I'm not sure I would have gone for if I found the missing link first. I don't know. But my good fortune again was to have it occur to me, again, that wisdom that seems to have the perfect timing for anything in our life. And if we listen, I'm not always good at that. I get stubborn. But anyway, I did listen to the tape, and I was with my husband, who's gone now, Cam Shuford. And 5 minutes into the tape, I knew I had found the missing link. So I hadn't met Sid, I just heard him on a tape. So it was a few months later that I went to a talk, Cam and I went to a talk on Salt Spring Island. And I think the thing that from the minute that the penny dropped for me, there's never been a doubt in my mind that what Sid realized was the truth, is the missing link, and that's a knowing, you might say, a truth that is eternal as always. It's who we are and what we are, and that there's no end to seeing that at a deeper and deeper level. And so we go to Salt Spring. And I think that, you know, my husband, who wasn't as impacted initially by that, right? But he was very, you know, perceptive. And we get to Salt Spring and we walk into this room with people in there like Elsie and Ken and Chip and Jan and Roger and so many others, right, that are on here. And immediately we're struck by the feeling. There was such a feeling of quiet and yet aliveness at the same time. And watching couples together was amazing, right? And you know, my Cam, that sealed the deal for him, because he really saw that this was something that was real, that was true. And talk about humor, there was all kinds of humor, right? And yet this very deep feeling of peace at the same time. And yes, Sid's humor, I one quick story for me is, I don't know if I called him or he called me, but I was making some decisions in my life at the time, which he seemed to be supportive of. And at some point in this conversation, he says, you know, Rita, and then he says this Scottish phrase, and I wish I knew. David Banks, maybe you know the phrase, or Judy. But basically, then he says, you know what that means? And I said, no, obviously. And he said, you're smarter than you look. Now, I wasn't quite sure how to take that, so I laughed, of course. I hoped it was a good statement. But yes, so many stories and so many beautiful, beautiful people and transformations through the years. And I'm so grateful. I'm grateful to Chris and Susie Sakura for inviting me to Hawaii and where I get to live now. And, you know, I love seeing Bill here and Judy and just all of you. What a blessing we have been gifted with in this life. I just continue to just feel that deeper and deeper. So I love you all. Hi, Max. There's so many people here.
So
Love you
many,
all.
but you get to choose one to throw it to. Rita, who is it?
Oh, well, I might as well throw it to Bill. I see you, Bill.
Where's Bill? Bill, if you just unmute yourself, sir, you will be live.
I didn't know if there were other Bills. I was looking around. I'm sure there might be. You know, as I listened to Krista and Bob and Richard and I met, you know, been on the island and met Jim Beck and never met Pam, but you know, and recently getting a chance to really get to know David Banks, David much better. I don't feel like I'm in the original wave, you know. I mean, Sid's experience was in '73, and I don't know when it was with George in the late '70s, but mine was 10 years after his experience. So in a way, 1983 was kind of the second wave, if you will. But I you know, many of you have heard the story that when I called Sid up and because it was the only book that we had in the late 1980s was Second Chance, and David has a wonderful story about that I hope he shares, about the opening pages almost getting thrown to start the fire the next morning. But I used to buy them because I had this very busy psychiatric practice that
Bill, hit your unmute for us, please, sir.
how long ago had I turned it off?
what you bought big in your practice?
Um, I bought big.
You
And you
said you
buy the second chance for your,
Right.
for
Oh, we used to buy the box, yeah. And I had a very, very busy practice and not a lot of time to spend with people. So I needed to be able to refer, to point them some direction beyond what the little time that I had with them. And so it was wonderful to have second chance. We didn't have any videos. I think I might have gotten a few of those audio cassettes, but and it was incremental for me, and as it is for many it's still incremental. But something was starting to happen, but I would get sometimes overwhelmed with things, and I would go back to reading the second chance. And it was actually the fourth time through second chance at the end of the first chapter when Richard said to Jonathan, "What is your definition of success?" And Jonathan looked out to sea and said, "Simple, happiness and contentment." Well, that was the fourth time that I had read, and Richard said, "Isn't that enough?" Or Richard said, "Is that all?" And Sid's character said very quietly, "Isn't that enough?" And I see George nodding, and it took my breath away, as it has different times during this process. And I thought, wow, this new box of second chances that I got must be the second edition. I got so excited to have the new second edition of Second Chance. And so I called Mr. Banks up in Salt Spring and told him how excited I was about this new edition of Second Chance that had this great question at the end of the first chapter. I thought it added so much to the book, and I wanted to congratulate him. I mean, I'm serious, right? And I hear this Scottish laugh that I think Richard or Krista might have been close to holding his belly and his tears watering, because it got louder and louder and louder. And to the point I finally said, kind of almost as I've been heard described, that his mother-in-law said to him, "Mr. Banks, do you want to tell me what is so funny?" Right? And he finally stopped laughing long enough to say, as many of you have heard, he said, "Bill, I haven't changed one word in that book since it was written." And I'll end with, it wasn't a Sid story, but in a way it is. I in my own journey, George, I've had an experience, and we've talked, but I haven't told you this. Early on, George talked about how fast people were thinking and how that was important for them to slow down. And I, being a psychiatrist, I often went more to, the power of thought. To me, there's both direction and speed. There's both direction and velocity. And I had been kind of taught in my training more about the direction than the velocity. So I looked to things like guilt, worry, unresolved grief, overanalyzing, being upsetting thinking, ego-based proving oneself, fear-based thinking. So I was used to thinking of the direction of the thinking and not so much the speed. And I recently have a greater appreciation for what, George, you talked about 35 years ago to me about the speed. As for myself, my direction is usually decent, but speed, Krista Campsell's course on my guidance side, lesson 4 for first graders, is realizing you can move from fast and furious to calm and curious. And I tell people, this is the first grade lesson, number 4. And after 37 years, on my good days, I'm at a B-. And on bad days, I'm at a D+. And then I was reading Hannah Studley's book this past week, and I'll end with this. And I've always been trying to slow down to the speed of life, as Joe and Richard Carlson wrote so much in their book, to slow down to the speed of life. And she talked about, on the last chapter of her book, slowing down to the speed of peace. And I had another one of those times when I almost took my breath away. I'd never heard that statement. It maybe had been written all over, but I'd never heard it, slowing down to the state of peace. And I realized that even though the speed of life and the speed of peace may be the same thing, to me, I think the speed of life has been subjective, and it's been about 8 miles an hour and 12 kilometers per hour faster than the speed of peace. So I say that only that I'm still on my journey, as we all are. People have said it's lifelong, as Rita pointed out, it's lifelong. And that's not discouraging, that's exciting as hell. So thank you for the time. I hope I didn't take too much.
No, sir, it was brilliant and beautiful, but you do have to toss.
I do have to toss.
Yes, sir, you do
Oh,
have to
where's
toss.
my good friend Keith Blevins? Keith, I won't tell stories that we have together, but well, this is Sid's stories, but I share it to send it to Keith.
Keith, all you do is unmute your mic, sir, and you are live. There you go.
Hi, everybody. It's such a tremendous good fortune to be to having met Sid and to be involved with you all these like-minded people. And we had so many experiences, my wife and I, Valda, early on. Our trips up to Salt Spring, we stayed a few months up there. We got to meet so many beautiful people that were such great teachers, and several of them are on this call, and I'm grateful to all of you. Sid was an interesting phenomena, you know, for all of us, really. I mean, those changes, I can hear everyone talking about something happened, you know, something startling happened, something unexpected, something that you never thought before occurred, and that just came, you know, that's continued to happen over and over and over again, and Sid would often say that this really isn't about me, but it's not about me, it's not about the teachers, but that was hard to fathom. But it was about life, really, and so in the journey, we met so many people, and then in various places where Valda and I moved. We lived in California and Florida and Minnesota and Texas and Washington State now. So in going through all those experiences, just it was like a crucible of learning. So they were remarkable. There's one story that I thought to share, but it was an interesting experience because it was kind of shocking. It wasn't particularly funny, but it was a wake up. So we were living in San Francisco, and George and Linda were there, and Roger was there, and Roger and George and I had written some papers and written the first papers and started the first business organization to teach the principles. And Roger had met this psychiatrist who was quite a character. And in those days, we often thought, well, all we have to do, if we meet someone we couldn't really get much traction with, we thought, well, we'll bring in the big guns, we'll bring in Sid, that'll do it. Sid was the, the bazooka, so we often thought we'll just get them in front of Sid, and then miracles will happen. But we just didn't, we didn't realize the gap. I mean, the gap was lifetimes, not just sentences. And so the gap was always, it was invisible to us. And so we had this, so Roger met this psychiatrist, and he was tall, and he was flamboyant. He wore a hat, a kind of a fedora hat, and he had a peacock feather on it, and he had this beautiful Victorian house that he practiced in. And George and Linda were there, and Roger and myself, and so we met with his staff, and the staff didn't really have any idea who we were, or certainly no idea who Sid was, and so we brought Sid in to have a seminar with the staff, and it was just a disaster, because the staff not being made aware of anything. I mean, there was such a distance between us and them, but between us and Sid, it was just extraordinary. So Sid comes in, and we meet everyone, and we settle down, and he starts talking, and right away someone from the staff has something to say, and so they kind of, in a way, I didn't realize, but they were arguing, and so Sid addressed it, and then there was another person, and so Sid, realizing what we had set him up as, said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought this would be. I can see now this was a mistake, and so thank you for your time, but I'll be going now." And so he left the room, and so George and Linda and Roger and I didn't know. I mean, we went with him, and so we're all going down the hallway, and the psychiatrist comes running down the hallway. No, wait, don't leave. We're sorry. We'll listen. Apologies. Please come back. So he begged Sid to come back. So Sid said, okay. So he came back, and he sat down and talked for just a short while, and right away somebody's arguing again, and Sid says, okay, that's it, and he just leaves. And we went out to a restaurant then, and for for the next couple of hours, it was humbling, to say the least. It was so humbling, because Sid really let us have it. I remember Linda just sitting there sobbing for 2 hours, just struck by what how unexpected and how humbled we were to realize what a really terrible idea this was. What a waste of time for Sid's time to have to reckon with this sort of challenges and stuff. And so it was a lesson well learned. I remember that very, very well, and it was it really taught me to the gap and the listening and the and the humility and the importance of that getting out of my head about how to make this have happen. This was not your ordinary person, and that was really helpful to see. So I wanted to mention that.
What? No, but that's a great story, Keith, because it's like we just were clueless that it was just a horrible setup and we didn't see it.
Yes. Yes. We were like glad to do it, like we thought it was a great idea, and it was the worst idea possible, but we didn't realize that until it was too late.
And Keith, that's honestly one of the reasons we want to keep conversations like this happening. So I spent 20 years in the military, and when the generals came to talk, they had the same manuals we did. It just sounded much different from them because they had about 30 some years of combat war experience under their belt. And I'm looking at it like at year 3, like, how did he get that from this? So these type conversations, because at some point it's going to be on us to continue this in the community. This is not ending. This is, in my words, it's just the beginning, because I'm just getting started. Like, we want to take this and we want to continue to hear all of these amazing stories. So every new practitioner, young practitioner, just had your insight yesterday, can understand what we're talking about and help the next. Even if you're not a practitioner, like it's open to you. It's open to you to enjoy your life and be happy and be content. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Miss Judith.
Who do we turn to?
She raised her hand. So Judith down there at the bottom.
Okay.
So I have no idea where I'm on anybody's screen, but it's really I can see myself, but and I can see a lot of people, but I'm sure that I'm on everybody's different screen. So it's a pleasure to be here. When you told that story, Keith, it just made me think of something years later that that Bill and I were a party to. Bill Pettit and I were a party to at West Virginia University, and it was poor Sid. I thought, as you were telling this story, I thought, oh my God, it's been years and years and years of this kind of thing. And, it never got better because we had this one time, and it was after we'd been at West Virginia for about 10 years. And Sid, we decided, was going to come and just meet with small groups instead of trying to do the big group thing and put him up in the chair on the stage. And, we thought maybe it'd be impactful to have him meet with small groups of people around the campus. And Bill was on the faculty in behavioral medicine, which was never really fond of our work, but they really liked Bill and they tolerated me and as a person. And so Bill said, do you think we could get the staff together, maybe at lunchtime or something, and Mr. Banks could come over and speak to you? And they agreed to it, which shocked us. So my job was to pick Sid up at the hotel and take him to the behavioral medicine building, which was separate from the medical school, huge medical school building, and then meet the chairman of the department in his office. And then we would walk down together to the meeting. And then Bill's job was to get everybody together at the meeting ready to go. So I did, Sid and I went to the chairman's office, and the chairman, let me put it this way, he tolerated all of us grudgingly. And so he was always quite formal and with Sid, and he wasn't overwhelmingly friendly, but he was never nasty. He was just kind of indifferent, but here you are, so I'll do my job. So he wasn't planning to stay for the meeting, but he was going to introduce Sid. And so we started to walk from the chairman's office, which was it was this kind of a long building, and the meeting room was on one end, and we were in the chairman's office on the other end, and we had to walk through the main lobby to get from one side of the building to the other. And so Sid and Jim Stevenson, the chairman, and I are walking through the main lobby, and all of a sudden Jim waves at this guy that's sitting in one of the chairs, And he calls out to the guy, says, "Oh, I'll be back in just a little bit. I've just got to stop in at a meeting for a minute and I'll be right back." And the guy says, "Oh, okay." And as we walk along, Jim turns to Sid and he says, "You know, I've been seeing that guy for 18 years. Yeah, you can see what's coming, right? He says, I've been seeing that guy with 18 years for 18 years. And I could see, I was looking at Sid and I saw his face and it
Oh
was,
my God.
oh my God, you know, he was horrified. And then and Jim says, "But you know, he's never gotten any better." And I could see like smoke coming out of Sid's ears when he said,
Oh my God.
yeah, you can imagine. And we're walking, we're getting closer and closer to the door. And then Jim says, and Sid says to Jim, he says, "Did you say 18 years? Yeah." And Sid says, that's a long time to me that he didn't get any better. And Jim says to him, "Well, you know, he is really mentally ill." And Jesus, I was like, oh my God. And Sid was like turning a different color by the time we got in the room. And then here's poor Bill with all these other psychiatrists. He has no idea that this has happened, right? So Bill's like, "Hey, Sid, it's great to see you and so glad." And, you know, and Jim comes in, he doesn't even introduce Sid, he just leaves. And because I think he felt what was coming. So Bill starts to introduce Sid and talk about, you know, what it had meant to him to know Sid and everything, and everybody's listening. And Sid couldn't hold it in. He just couldn't, you could see it. It was killing him to think of this guy in the lobby that had been a mental health patient with the chairman of the department as his doctor for 18 years and didn't get any better because he was, you know, really mentally ill. And Sid just started talking. Bill was in the middle of a sentence and Sid said, "Wait." And Sid says, "You guys, you're missing the point entirely. You can't be treating people year after year after year and they don't change and nothing happens for them. Doesn't that bother you? Doesn't that upset you? Doesn't that mean anything to you?" It was like, I've never seen Sid quite that worked up. And Bill's like shocked because he doesn't know anything about what's just happened. And I can't say anything. I know I'm the only person in the room that understands how this came to be. And Sid just starts talking about how people have it in them, this beautiful spiritual quality. And how could you miss that? How could you not work with that? Why aren't we working with the wellness in people? And soon, you know, people just started drifting out of the room. So pretty soon it was me and Bill and a couple of people who were too polite to leave, and Sid's still talking.
And they're saying, what's your point?
Yeah, like, what's your point? It's just so terrible. And I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, you know, because and I couldn't say anything. Like, I couldn't say to Bill, "It's okay, you know, what happened in the hall," because first of all, the other psychiatrists would have thought that was normal. They were seeing people for a long time too.
Yeah.
So, but you know what happened is, so after this, we finally all got out of there and I was able to tell Bill what had happened. And then Sid wanted us to get this guy, you know, he says, I want to talk to that guy, the 18-year guy. And of course I can't go in and take the chairman's patient out of his office and say, "There's a guy in the lobby who wants to talk to you," you know, and there's no way that we could arrange that. And Sid was very frustrated by that fact, you know, because he wanted to really help this poor man that had been mentally ill for 18 years. And we ended up back in our office and I don't remember all the details, but I remember just it made a huge impact on me because Sid was like, "You know, you people have been here for 10 years. And it was like saying, I don't see the difference between you and the chairman. These people aren't changing. What the hell are you doing here?"
Mm.
And, you know, and he was honest about it, you know, like, this is not right. And it really changed me, you know, because I started, it didn't make me want to leave or anything. It just kind of got to me that how many times I had backed off.
Yeah.
In the face of aggressive opposition, let's put it that way, which was frequent in a medical school. And how many times, in other words, like, we were having amazing results individual people. Like Bill did an enormous amount of wonderful work with, with psychiatric patients, and almost all the doctors who knew Bill, if they had a son or a cousin or a relative or a friend that needed help, they would send them to Bill. Meanwhile, the behavioral medicine people are going like, no, that's crazy, and don't do that. And our work spoke for itself, but nobody was listening. So except the patients. And I was working with students. I was actually assigned to be the mental health mentor for students who were on academic probation, because the assumption was if you got into medical school, you could do the work because it's very competitive. And the people that got into medical school definitely could do the work. It's not like they were, oh my God, I'm too dumb to do this. But a lot of them would end up on academic probation. It was always psychological. It wasn't intellectual. And early on in my getting to West Virginia, when I was working with this academic committee that was changing the format for how they handled students who were on academic probation, I was actually consultant to that committee right after I got to WVU. And I talked to them about the fact that many times people fail at things, not because they can't do them, but because they have a something in their thinking that is between them and doing it, Mm-hmm. And they were very intrigued by that, because they were having a hard time with medical students who didn't want to go to behavioral medicine, end up being diagnosed, having that on their record. And they definitely didn't want to take psychotropic medications because they had to study. They had to be sharp, they had to be able to read tons of books and things. And they always felt that'll just make me, flaky. So they wrote me into the academic probation thing for quite a few years. And so many students got interested in the work through that, between the residents that saw Bill, that followed Bill around and saw Bill work, and the students that would come to me for help with their academic probation. And I had a really high success rate with them. And I'm thinking, like, the evidence is all around us. It's like we're sitting in a field of flowers, and the people that we need to be on our side are saying, what are all those weeds out there? What the hell's going on here? Mm-hmm. And it got to me that day. And I know it got to Sid. I felt so sorry for him, because I just felt like I felt bad. I was like you, Linda. I was crying. I just felt like we really let him down, because that shouldn't still be true here.
That Judy, that's such a great story, because I'd forgotten that one of the most shocking things for me after I'd been with Sid and got really deeply in touch and entrenched with his teaching, and I'd go out and it'd be like either people didn't know what you were talking about, and they'd look at you like you were crazy, or they'd get very upset. And it was always so startling to me that they couldn't hear. It was very perplexing.
Yeah.
The whole, yeah.
Yeah, and it's still, it's to this day, I'm still perplexed by that we just keep looking to go deeper ourselves until we can communicate more clearly. But anyway, I got a zillion stories, but that one just, Keith, you inspired me.
That was a great story. Thank you.
That was a very good story, Judith. And I actually, in my insight in coming to the principles, I fought it. I literally sat across from Michael Neal and asked him, are you playing with me, or are you serious, before I start believing you? Like, don't play with me, because this is my life. Like, are you serious?
Yeah.
And that was it. Because it's what you know. It's what I had known every day up until that point. But in listening, I'm going to listen to my own body and take a 5-minute comfort break. So everybody, we're going to take a short 5-minute comfort break, and then come right back and continue the conversation. And may even have some, yes, ma'am, go ahead.
I pass to Christine Heath before we go, so she'll speak.
Absolutely. So we start with Chris, and we'll start with Chris as soon as we come back.
Right. Yeah.
But go ahead, Chris. Go ahead. It's all on you.
Well, I was in Minnesota when I first came across this work with Roger Mills, and Joe Bailey and I were in the same office building, and he had gone down to this conference in Florida with his friend Keith Blevins and met the love of his life. And I was definitely looking for the love of my life. So I was really interested in the story he had about this woman he met. I really didn't give a crap about this guy he was talking about, but he ended up having a conference on this new work, which I went to, and I had a huge shift. And then after that, went down to Florida to meet Sid. And I remember this is the beginning of my realizing I wasn't a very good listener, is that I thought I knew everything. I thought that I'd already had like this great shift, and I knew what the principles were. I knew it. Of course, we didn't talk about the principles then. I knew what he was talking about. And he was so funny because we would he loved to go to the swap meet, which, at the time, I was going to discos and trying to get out and about. Going to swap meets was not my thing, but I just wanted to hang out with him. I mean, this feeling that he was in was so peaceful that I just wanted, whatever he wanted to do, I was fine with doing it. And I remember we would walk along and he would see things that nobody else saw. Like, he was so present, and he would see beauty underneath piles of junk, like it was, to me, it was such a great metaphor, because no matter what person he talked to, he saw the beauty in them, and he saw the beauty in life, and he was able to see that. So I'd be like walking along thinking I'm in this great place, and I'd start chattering. And I think I'm talking about something interesting. And what was always funny about it to me was that he'd kind of look at me and then he'd look away. And like the question I asked didn't even exist, and luckily I was smart enough not to ask it again. But it was just this kind of like, you are nuts right now, I'm not going there. And just would totally move into a different space. It was great. And so that, that listening was amazing. Now you got to remember that back in the day, we had no cell phones. We had just gotten an answering machine. Like at the clinic Joe and I we had this answering service that would pick up our calls. And we would have, we would be thinking we're doing really good, really good. This is great stuff. Isn't this wonderful stuff? And then we get a call. I remember the one time, I don't know if you remember this, Joe, but we were in a staff meeting and we were sitting there and the phone rang, and usually the answering service would pick it up. But there were two calls that came in at the same time. So I got up and answered the second one, and it was Sid. And he goes, "You guys have totally lost the feeling. You're totally out to lunch. I can't believe that you're so stupid." I mean, he didn't say that, but that was what I heard. "And you need to get your act together." Boom, hang up the phone. And we're like, oh my God, like what? And it was this ability that he had to kind of slap you upside the head and wake you up. And we would sit down, and as soon as we started to kind of reflect on it, it was true. We just kind of, we used to call it going to sleep, where we'd kind of go back into our intellect and with a new way of thinking, a new, like this new way of talking about things. And like, we knew what we were talking about. Right. And so when he would do that, we'd all call each other like, "Hey, blah, 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 wake up everybody." And it's like this wave would go out from that experience, and whoever got it, that's what would happen. We would always kind of share it, because we all knew we were totally lost. And I think sometimes his expectations of us, or his belief in us and what we knew, was so powerful. And we didn't see that, right? We didn't actually see what he saw in us. So we would do stupid things. And one of the things that we did was we decided we'd like try to put this information or talk about this in ways that would kind of synthesize things. So we came up with 4 principles, not the 3 principles he was talking about, but 4. We got thought right. That was about it. But then we talked about kind of derivatives of that and made up these 4 principles. And people wrote books, and we talked about it all the time. And somebody somebody went to talk to Sid, and he goes, Sid, these guys are talking about 4 principles. He goes, what? And of course, everybody sent him his book, but he didn't read them, right? So we're thinking like, we're doing good. We know what we're talking about. This is really great. And it was like, what? And then it was the strangest experience, because you think you're listening, and then you realize that you weren't listening at all, that you just couldn't hear that. And to me, sorry, that's still happening, right? Like, that's still the beauty of this. Like, sometimes people will talk about how we get like picky with people, or we're the thought police or whatever, but really, it's like the ability to not think is really really powerful. And you get so easily tricked by thinking what he was talking about. Like the summer before he passed away, or not the summer, a few months before he passed away, he called me up, and he was very upset with me, and he said, Chris, you are not listening. You don't know what the 3 principles are. And I said, okay, you want me to stop teaching? No. And that moment was like, yeah, Chris, you're not listening. You have to see something deeper. And honestly, if like what we see now is small compared to what he saw, there's so much more beyond this. So the more people, just for me anyway, that's been the thing that I want to just help people remember, is that when you think you're listening, you might not be. And always seeing that there's more, that there's a deeper level of understanding of what you think you know.
Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing that. And before I get you to toss, I do want to thank you as well as the board because of what you just said. And I just want to let everybody know pretty soon, the 3PGC will be releasing a new podcast entitled We're Listening. And the whole intent of it is all voices heard throughout the community to continue doing what just happened, sharing that feeling, sharing that experience from all over, so everybody can understand what we're talking about. So we would love your support in that. It'd be hosted by me and anybody else who wants to jump on and have a great time with me. But that's what we're doing. We're talking about the evidence of impact, and we want to listen more to give this deeper understanding. So thank you, Chris, and you get to pick and choose.
Hey, Joe, you got to unmute yourself.
I said, I knew you were going to do that. Oh, good to hear from you, Chris. Brings back lots of memories. When I think about what I would want to say about Sid, I go back to meeting Sid the first time. And I can thank my dear friend Keith Blevins, who hounded me for many years, sending me Sid tapes, which I would very quickly toss away, because I thought, who is this wacky guy from California? What is he into now? Which said a lot about me, more than about Keith. I was pretty cynical, pretty skeptical of anything new. I thought I'd try everything. So I don't know, a lot of us have had that experience when you're really ready to hear something, and you don't even know that you're ready to hear something, but you feel drawn to something. So one night, Keith and Valda called me. This was like summer of 1980, over 40 years ago, 40 and a half years ago. And they said, Sid's going to be speaking at the University of Miami Medical School in November. Why don't you come down and hear Sid? Once again, he didn't give up on me. And something in me, it just felt like a giant magnet pulling me to Sid. And then he added a little frosting on the cake and said, by the way, there's this gal named Michael who we'd really love for you to meet. And that sealed the deal. So I had no idea really what I was getting into. And I really didn't know what was going to hit me. that weekend. But that first night, after having met Michael a few hours before, the love of my life for 40 years, a few hours later, we're having dinner at Rick Suarez's sister, Kim, what's her name? Florabella. And there's only maybe like a dozen people sitting around the room. We're all having lasagna and talking, and I'm just chit-chatting away as Joe Bailey would do, just chit, and kind of busy-minded. And all of a sudden, Sid starts to speak. Well, I didn't really even notice that he started to speak. I kept talking to the person next to me, and all of a sudden, the room got really quiet. And I'd realized that I was like, "Oh God, what's going on here?" I felt like I'd was dropped on the moon or something. Felt an extreme amount of discomfort. And all of a sudden, Sid just turns and starts talking to me. And I just, I felt two things. I felt like everything he was saying was coming from such a deep presence, such a deep truth that I had never heard before. And it was just changing me in ways I couldn't describe. The other part of me was wishing there was a trap door right below me and I could push it and get out of the room as fast as possible, because he was collapsing everything I had so well constructed and believed about how to help people as a psychologist. It was destroying everything I thought. But every time I would have a skeptical question in my mind, I would just about ask it, and in the next sentence, he would answer it. And that kind of set the stage for my relationship with Sid. He always seemed to know just when to say something to me, when to pick up the phone and call me, and just when I needed to be confronted, just when I needed to be pulled back in, just when I needed to hear something deeper. Sid always had so much love for us, so much caring for us, that we were in his heart and in his mind, and he knew when we needed to hear what we needed to hear. And he never gave up. There were times when he probably should have given up on me, but he never really ever gave up. And that impacted me that night. It changed my life in ways that I had no idea. And the other thing I would mention that really impacted me was really about you, Judy. When you and Sid and Michael and I, after the talk in Torquay, England, we went to Ireland on a trip with the two of you. And that was such an extraordinary, unbelievable, magical, mystical journey like I'd never been on before. And what was most enjoyable about it was just being with Sid, being ordinary, being a person, not giving a talk, not trying to coach me, just hanging out with Sid, playing golf with Sid, going to the pubs in Ireland, and drinking a few shanties together, and just being in Sid's presence as an ordinary human being, with his humor, with his uh, unbelievable presence, is taking his time every step of the way to talk to people, to notice something I would never see, to take his time eating a meal. Everything about the way he lived taught volumes about how to live life. And that's what sticks with me. And I felt so blessed to have had Sid in my life. And even to this day, you know, we can feel his presence just in how he's coming back to life as we speak about him today, because of how he's touched each of us. It's almost as though he's still watching over us. So anyway, thank you so much, Keith, for introducing me, Christine, for being affected, and us starting the Institute together, and all the magical mystery tour we had, discovering how to get this out to the world. And
I want to tell one little story about that time. Remember that first time we brought Sid up to talk, and we had this community meeting where we had maybe 150 people that came, and and we'd never done this before. This was all new. And so I get up in front of the group and say, okay, if anybody needs to pay, you can pay later, and da da da. And Sid did not ever want to make this work be about money. I mean, that was just like the worst thing, but I didn't know that then. And I was just taking care of the business, right? And so afterwards we get done and he is so upset, but he's upset with Joe for doing it. And he got so mad at you. And I'm sitting back, do I say anything like, oh no, Sid, it was me that did? No way.
Thanks, Chris.
So I gotta apologize for that now, Joe.
Oh, okay, I accept that. Luckily I don't remember that. So
You don't remember that? Oh gosh.
yeah. Well, so I have to toss it to someone else.
Yes, Linda speaking though. Unmute yourself, Linda. And you don't have to, Joe. I'm gonna toss it to one person for you, but I want to hear what Linda has to say.
Linda, you're not muted. Or you are muted.
She's coming. Yeah, she'll come back up. As she do though, right before she comes back up, it sounds like, and I didn't coin this term, but I use it a lot. Sounds like Sid was the perfect loving disruption, where he disrupted you with so much love, you accepted it. Where
I'm sorry, I was gonna say, hey, thank you, Joe, for that story. It reminded me, it just brought back times with Sid that were just so remarkable. I really appreciate it. And also, Chris, it's really funny because he would get mad. He would get mad at George, but he wouldn't get mad at me.
Yeah.
I think he had a thing about not getting mad at women. I don't know.
Yeah.
He'd get mad at George, but not get mad. I'd always get away with everything.
No, he'd get mad at Chris.
Oh, he did? Well, right, he did. I forgot.
He got mad at me plenty of times. I can tell you that. So
no, he didn't ever got mad at me.
Respect.
It's really nice. George always took it.
Yeah.
On the chin.
That is so funny. I do want to give a chance, Catherine. I can't see you, Kathy Casey. This was sort of your brainchild when you threw it out during the tournament. So if you'll speak, I'll bring you up.
Okay.
There you go, Kathy. Thank you, one, for the wanting to do this and throwing it out there. So it's on you.
Oh, great. Well, first of all, I want to thank Joe Bailey. Joe Bailey is the reason why I even heard the principles, because he was addressing a huge group of folks here in Santa Clara County. And I was sitting there just to look good to this woman to get hired in a permanent position. She invited me to go. And I thought, well, I better go because, you know, I want to impress her. So I was sitting in front of Joe Bailey and Mark Howard, by the way, but I remember Joe more than Mark. And literally, I saw the huge crowd and I thought, great, I can slip out, you know? I waved to her. She was on the other side. Hey, I made it. I'm here. And she said, oh, I'm so glad you made it. And so I thought, oh, great. And so literally, I'm looking at my watch and I'm near the exit and I'm listening to you two guys talking about clearing our minds. You kept talking about clearing our minds and I don't know what else it was, but I'm looking to leave and I'm like, what do you mean clear my mind? I have so much going on in my head. If I cleared my mind, I'd go to hell in a handbasket. I mean, but you guys kept harping on it in different ways. And I'm sitting there looking to leave, but also arguing with you in my mind. Like, forget this. This is BS. But you wore me down. You guys wore me down. You kept at it. And finally, inside of myself, I said, fine, I'll clear my mind. And I forgot about leaving. And I just, okay, you beat me down. And that's when you guys presented the principles. You just sort of slid it in before lunch. And that was the beginning of this life I'm in now. I don't know what happened, but it just totally impacted me. So thank you, Joe. I blame you when things are crazy. You got me into this. But just to let you know, I didn't even know about Sid. I was teaching this for close to 12 months in the jails, working in drug treatment programs, having amazing results. We were watching these miracles happen. And of course, Roger was our mentor. And one day, George Pransky was doing a session up in Berkeley. He says, oh, Sydney Banks will be speaking in Hawaii, blah, blah, blah. And everybody got excited and they're writing everything down. And Faye and I, we looked at each other and we said, who the hell is he? Sydney Banks. And I looked at Faye and I said, oh, we're screwed. It's probably some guru guy, because we hadn't heard about him at all, ever. And we're doing this work like crazy. So I told Faye, I said, well, we got to go check him out. That, if this guy's, a flake or weird, this is bad, because we've put money on this. The county has funded this. My professional reputation is on this. I mean, I was freaked out. So we flew to Hawaii to hear Sid speak, but not to just hear him, but to check him out. And so, of course, we're in this hotel, no windows. It's kind of lecture style. And they have the special chair. And then, of course, everybody's really quiet. And then the Hawaiian lady comes out and does her thing. And I'm like, oh man, what did I get myself into? I'm screwed. And so I'm like, okay, well, you're stuck. You can't leave, because I was kind of in the middle and there was only one door down at the bottom there. So I thought, okay, so I'm listening, and he was talking about the principles, and I'm thinking, well, yeah, that's what we teach. Like, yeah, okay, that's what we're teaching. And then this woman, she raised her hand and she asked this question about this friend who had these medical issues and this and that. And it was kind of a long, drawn out question. And finally she said, so Sid, what should I tell her to do? So I'm thinking, oh, here it comes. Here comes the big woo-woo weird thing. And he took a while. There was this long pause. And then all of a sudden he said, well, I think she should see a doctor. So like, oh, okay. Okay, I'm cool. We're cool. So I was sort of okay so far. I didn't get that he was a mystic yet. That hadn't hit me yet. But at least he wasn't weird, and he wasn't one of these weird guru guys. So everybody, of course, surrounded him when he took the break. And I just stood there, kind of standing where I was sitting. Everybody was gone, but I was just standing there kind of watching him and watch the people surround him. And all of a sudden he cuts through the people. He cuts through them and he starts walking up the aisle. And I'm thinking, oh, he doesn't know the door is down there. He's going the wrong way. So I'm thinking, oh, he's going to go to a dead end. But no, he was walking towards me. And he comes right up to me. He says, I want you to come to Dunsmuir. And he turned around and he left. I'm like, what the heck does that mean? We came back from break. He spoke some more. I was totally cool with it. Again, surrounded by tons of people. And he finds me and he says, I want you to come to Dunsmuir. And I'm like, okay. And I had to go find Roger. I said, what the hell does that mean? And Roger, oh, we're having bankers and business people, and he wants you to come. And so don't worry, we'll get you up here. And I'm like, yeah, I guess. But that's how I met Sid. That's how I met Sid. And Sid, I never knew what was going to happen when Sid would come up to me. Other times, Kathy, you don't know. And I'm like, I know, Sid, I don't know anything. He says, but you keep doing what you're doing, but don't get cocky, don't get full of yourself. And I'm like, I know. And another time, I'll just share one last story. I did a project where I was teaching people who were diagnosed with severe schizophrenia. And not doing it willingly, Bob Garner said, no, you're going to do this. And I was so grateful to him. Because of him, I got exposed to the principles. So he was our boss. So I show up to teach this group of folks who, straight out of the movie, totally delusional, bizarre. My first time looking at this group of folks, about 25 patients. It was an in-house treatment program. I wanted to run home. I'm thinking, I want my mommy right now. I mean, that's how I felt. Like I did not want to be there. And then all of a sudden my colleague and I, she was feeling the same way. And we looked at each other and we went, well, if it's true that every human being has this wisdom, has this clarity of thought, has this spiritual essence, then it must be in them too. So we just got really calm and really present, and then started to engage, which I wish they could have filmed over time, the change. But here's the thing, this woman came out of pure delusion and kind of wacky mind, asked this very deep question. And we looked at each other and we said, well, we don't know how to answer that, but we have somebody we can call. So we're going to call him and ask him. So we called up Sid, we explained, who the folks were and who this woman was and, kind of how bizarre she is, but she's asking this question. And he laughed. He started laughing. He said, yeah, that's way above your pay grade. And we said, well, yeah, we know, that's why we're calling you. He said, no, I can't even give you an answer because you still wouldn't be able to understand. And I'm like, and that's when I really knew I didn't know. And then I said, well, Sid, how could somebody who has schizophrenia ask such a deep question? And he said, Kathy, it's moment to moment thought. Moment to moment of pure enlightenment, wisdom, and then pure delusion, pure. He said, that's how this whole thing works. And so she slipped into that part of herself. And so because she knows already, regardless of, what her organic issues are. Wow, that just blew me away. So we went back to her and we said, well, maybe we could arrange a phone call for you, but right now we can't even answer your question because we don't even understand. And she was cool with it. I mean, she was cool with it, but I will never forget that experience. So Christine, you're right. We're clueless. I mean, we think, we're teaching away and, pointing people, and then that happens and you're like, yeah. So she was way ahead of us. And I am so grateful to get to meet him, know him with little I did get to know him. He was always supportive of me and the work I was doing and the work that our community was doing. And I feel the same way. I feel like he's still with us. And I pinch myself that I got to experience somebody like that. So that's pretty much it.
I knew it. Thank you so much, Corey. We're getting close to the end.
Yeah.
There's somebody I do want to, and feel free not to if you don't want, but Miss Judy Banks or David Banks, if you would like to.
Oh, Judy, where are you?
Yeah, we'd love to have either of you. If you feel inclined, we'd love to.
Oh, hi, Judy.
We'd love to tie things up with either of you sharing something.
Where is she? Is she there?
I'm here.
Yay, there she is.
I don't have anything really useful to add to the conversation, I mean, because other than the conferences, Sid and I didn't talk about three principles. We talked about what you're going to have for dinner tonight. We talked about, wasn't that a beautiful sunset? We talked about, hey, Judy, you're doing that wrong. It was just like any other people. It was just ordinary. I mean, extraordinary, but ordinary. And that's about all I can say, really. It's, I feel very fortunate that I stumbled across him or he stumbled across me, but I know nothing, and I know nothing, which is really frustrating. So that's all I can say. Maybe David would like to say something.
Thank you, Judy.
Nice to see you. Well, I don't have a huge amount to say either, except that I think as the years pass by, I just feel a greater and greater sense of thanks and blessing that I was able, that I had the father I did, and I was able to have a front row seat on his really beautiful spiritual journey. And there's just a quick story I might tell, and in some ways this is maybe a metaphor for his philosophy on life. But I was a young boy, about maybe 4 or 5 years old, and one day he said to me, today we're going to learn to ride a bicycle. And so he took the training wheels off my bicycle, and we went. There was this long dirt road in front of our house that went slightly downhill. And at the end of it, it was just a dead end. It was just bushes and bramble. And he said, okay, get on the bike. And for about 20 minutes, we struggled. I just wasn't getting it. I wasn't catching on to it. And I was kind of get more and more frustrated. So, but at some point it just kicked in. And so he pushed the bike, and I started pedaling, and the bike started moving down the road. He was running behind me. And as we were going downhill, it was going faster and faster. And I remember at one point yelling to him, Dad, how do I stop? And he says, don't worry about it. Don't worry. So anyways, the bike just kept going. And I got to the road, and of course I crashed into the bush. And I got up, and I was kind of covered in dirt and so on. And I said to him, look what happened, Dad. I got covered in dirt. He said, don't worry about it. You're on your way. And that's, to me, that's really indicative of the way he thought about spiritual journeys as well. And that the important thing was to move in the right direction. There would be bumps in the road along the way, but it was all about the journey in the right direction. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, sir.
Can I?
Absolutely.
Before we go, there's somebody on that a lot of us haven't talked to in a long time. And Shane Kennedy, are you still on?
Yes, I am. I'm right here.
Oh, good. You want to share something before we end? So great to see you.
Oh, so lovely to see all of you. I'm sorry I had to join late. I just got off a plane. But I'm so touched. I've been crying hearing these stories that I'm seeing all of you, and Judy and Dave and everybody else. But if I just share one little story, when Judy was there, when we went and stayed in a little villa in outside of Rome, when we went into the Vatican and went the Pieta and very school off. So I went and found and flagged down a bus to come, and I came back, and Sid I bent over an old woman who was asking for money, and the bus was waiting for us, and I said, come on, let's run. And he wouldn't leave, and he just kept talking to this woman who didn't speak English, and he's not Italian, and he asked me to translate for what she was saying. And then he just sat and talked to her and kept talking to her and pouring all this love on her. And her face went from being crippled, hurting, angry face to just looking like a Madonna almost, glowing. And it reminds me of all those times we were together, all of us that got touched by that, where it wasn't, yes, it's the words, but it wasn't just the words. It was his feeling and his love for people, his love for all of us, that he would give us so much of that attention, help us through all the tough times we had, and lead us into those beautiful times. And I think of another time we were together, even with Judy, I remember being in a restaurant, and he just started speaking, and the entire restaurant went quiet. The server stopped serving. Everybody just stayed, and they couldn't even perhaps hear him. But the feeling around him, that feeling of just real love poured out, and everybody could feel that and changed by it. And we were all changed by it. It's lasted our lifetimes. 1,000 stories to tell, but those are just, I remember and think about him all the time. the amount of love he had. Thanks.
Oh, Mr. Kennedy, that was absolutely amazing because that's exactly what we wanted to check the box on, making sure everybody remembered the love, the fun, the lightheartedness of continuing. Thank you so much for joining late after playing and sharing that. We do have a few more minutes. Anybody? If not, Dick, and I'm gonna give it to you to close us out.
Well,
Sandy Crotch, she's on here somewhere.
love to hear from Sandy. If,
Oh, yep, there she is.
yeah, good.
I was just about to disappear.
Letting you off the hook there, Sandy.
Why you have to leave me to have to follow that? Well, I have to first thank Rita Shuford. Rita's the person who pointed me towards Sid as and like many of you, I was a bit of a reluctant student, very, very much a reluctant student, but thank you, Rita. Honestly, I really, there's so many stories, but for some reason, the one that comes to my mind is a ridiculous one. I met Sid in 1981, and so I was, I guess, what Bill calls the second wave. And I was a student at the first clinic that utilized the principles and taught practitioners, the Advanced Human Studies Institute in Coral Gables, Florida. And Sid would come periodically to speak to us. And as many of you know, he was a very ordinary guy and he lived a very ordinary life. And one of the things he enjoyed doing was watching All in the Family. He quoted Archie Bunker all the time. And so those of us students, we were just desperate. We were desperate to learn, desperate to be like Sid, desperate to get enlightened. And so we all started watching Archie Bunker. I didn't even own a television set. I went out and I bought a television set so I could watch Archie Bunker. And Sid listened to Hawaiian music. I went out, I didn't even like Hawaiian music, but boy, I listened to Hawaiian music because, you know, we just were so dumb. We just were so dumb. We didn't know that it wasn't the point. And I think I'll come full circle with a song that was so beautiful that to start this all out when I can't remember her name, but the wonderful singer whose song said, when we keep looking outside our own yard. And that's what we were doing. We were looking outside our own yard for this understanding, this wisdom, this love. And when it wasn't in Archie Bunker and it wasn't in Hawaiian music, it was inside. And I keep forgetting and remembering and forgetting and remembering. And I probably will to my grave. So lovely to see you all, and thank you for putting this together.
Thank you, Sandra, for your share. Again, everybody, thank you so much for sharing this time with us. It's been a pleasure as new to the principles, and as I said, it being saved my life and an up and coming apprentice practitioner in this world. Thank you so much for just your shares and continuing to arm the new wave of people who want to continue this, because I never met Sid Banks, but I consider him someone who helped change my life. So thank you all. And with just that, Dickin, you can close us out, sir.
Well, thanks, Rob. Boy, you've been wonderful. Really, really appreciate what you've done. Kathy, thanks for calling us to this party. And Sandy, thanks. You were literally one of my first teachers.
So Dickin, maybe the next one can be our bloopers in sharing the understanding.
Yeah.
That, I think that would be fun also.
Kathy and I would laugh our head off. And as long as I've known Kathy, she's been saying we have to have a time when we can tell stories about what we were like when we were first trying to share this, and how funny that got and what happened. So,
or even now what we're like.
yeah, and continuing.
So stay tuned on that one.
Yeah, stay tuned. Well, I just want to thank everybody for coming. You know, in my mind, what attracted me to Sid originally was that listening to Sid talk woke my heart up and has continued to do that more and more. And listening today of just hearing everybody tell these stories from the heart has been very, very touching. And I can't think of a better way to start the holidays. You know, people all over the world are getting together and celebrating light. And boy, if Sid didn't help us to look in, as Dave Banks beautifully said, keep looking in that direction, keep going toward the light, and then keep being humbled over and over again as we rumble through the bushes and the dirt and getting back up again and doing the best we can to head toward the light. And I know, and it's evident today, Sid helped so many of us lighten up and get glimpses of the light. So happy holidays to everyone. Can't thank you enough for joining us and sharing stories. And maybe we can unmute everybody and we can just all say goodbye to each other. It's been a delight to see so many old friends and faces.
Thank you,
Judy and Dave, thank you.
Thank you. Love you.
Bye.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. That was amazing.
Hi, Keith. Hi, Keith.